friends, my name is Kim. I am the Child Development Specialist here at LAMP Early On, and for the month of March, we are going to be looking at developmental milestones for our little ones between the ages of 0 and 6. So last week we talked about our little ones between the ages of 2 and 3, and this week we are going to be talking about our little ones between the ages of 3 and 4 years. As a disclaimer in these videos, your little one may reach developmental milestones a little bit sooner or a little bit later than some of their peers or even some of their siblings. So just keep that in mind. If you do have any concerns at all that they're not reaching a certain developmental milestones, you can always reach out to me. And my email is always in the link in the description box below. But we're just going to jump right into the video. So between the ages of 3 and 4, you're going to notice, at least for their fine motor and gross motor skills, they are now running and jumping more easily. In the 2 and 3 year olds, especially as they were approaching 3, you'll notice that they were starting to walk up and down up the stairs using one leg at a time, whereas now in between the 3 to 4 year of age, they've refined that skill and they're doing it more with ease. This is when you'll also notice that they'll start being able to kick a ball. You'll find that their balance is a lot better, so they can hop on one foot, try and stand on one foot for 1 to 3 seconds without support. They can catch a large ball with outreached arms or hands. And then in terms of their fine motor skills, you'll notice that they're starting to use scissors, especially as they reach more towards 4 years. They'll get a little bit more comfortable holding and using scissors. They'll be able to hold and use crayons or pencils correctly, especially by the time they get to 4 years. And then as well, this is when you'll definitely notice if they're left-handed or right-handed, as you start to observe how they're holding pencils or crayons and stuff like that. So some ways you can encourage their gross motor and their fine motor, just like in last week's video, a lot of walks, a lot of nature walks to get them active and to get them moving, but at the same time work on all of those developmental gross motor skills. If you live by a park and you have a soccer ball or something soft, you can go out, kick the ball around a couple of times. As for our fine motor skills, let them really dress themselves a bit more independently. At the end of the 2 to 3 year age, so towards 3 years, you'll notice that they're definitely wanting to dress themselves a lot more, and even more so by the time they hit 4. So really encourage them to dress themselves, and then the fine motor skills come when they're trying to undo buttons and zippers. It might be a little bit hard for them to do up the buttons and the zippers, but undoing it will be easier. Also allowing for arts and crafts where they use scissors and then they're also having to draw is also very good for their fine motor skills. So cutting, gluing, painting, drawing, puzzles as well is also really good for fine motor skills, but it'll also be good for their cognitive development, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Also practicing their lacing skills. So they might not be able to tie their shoe yet, but you can encourage them to thread shoelaces through the holes of their shoes, or if you don't have shoes with shoelaces, if you get a piece of paper and you poke holes through it or punch out holes through it, and you get like a piece of ribbon or a piece of yarn or a piece of string, they can thread it through that way as well to kind of really practice that. In terms of their communication and language, last week I mentioned that some 3-year-olds might have 900 words. Not all 2 to 3-year-olds, but definitely by 4 years of age, they will have those many words, and they're also able to follow 3 or more step directions. So, for example, first, can you get the paper and then draw something and give it to me? You'll notice that they're a little bit more grammatically correct. So they're using a bit more adult grammar, and there's a sentence structure to them. They're able to tell stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if they're telling you about their day, they usually start in the morning and then till the evening time. They are showing increasingly complex imaginary play. So I mentioned last week, in the 2 to 3-year-old, you'll start seeing them do imaginative play. But by the time they're 4, it's a lot more complex, maybe with a lot more props. A lot more children are now involved, and each child has taken on a different role, and their imagination is definitely kicked into high gear. They can also generate a simple rhyme. So cat, bat, they can match some letters with their sounds. Like letter B says b, and letter T sounds like t. Or the easiest one, S is s. So stuff like that is what we are looking at between 3 and 4, especially approaching the 4-year mark. They definitely will, if they didn't really know their name when they were around the 2 to 3 mark, by the time they're 4, they should definitely know their name, their age. They can answer simple questions, and they're also able to be, they're speaking clearly enough so that most people are able to understand them well by the time they're 4 years of age. And that's including people that they're meeting for the first time and stuff like that. So some ways that you can really help promote their language skills is by, when you're reading stories, what I like to do, especially if it's a book that they've read before and a book that they've read numerous times, instead of me reading the words off of the page, I'll actually get my little one or the little ones to tell me what's happening in the book based off of the picture or based off of what they remember. And storybooks are 100 times more exciting when you switch up your voice for them for different parts. So different characters take on a different voice. You gotta get really animated with them. And I know right now libraries aren't really open, but if they are, going to the library. But if they're not, then in the link in the description box below, there is an internet library that you can access. Also, just accessing the library, the internet library from our local library. Or if you don't want to do that, YouTube has a lot of storybooks on there that people will do read alouds. If you go and you mute the sound, then you and your little one can read off of the screen, take turns. If you pause it, then you can allow your little one to create the story. So for their cognitive development, what happens by the time they're 4 is that it's really, they're able to correctly name familiar colors, so colors that they're used to. They can understand the idea of things being the same or being different, and they will start to compare sizes. So small versus big. And again, like I said before, they are pretend playing a lot more elaborately, and they're fantasizing a lot more. They can remember parts of a story. So this is now talking about their memory, which is why when we're reading books to them, I like that whole tell me what you think is happening next, because it not only works on their language, but it works on their memory skills as well. They can understand time better, so they might not be able to read the clock, but they can understand the difference between morning, afternoon, and night. They'll be able to count and understand the concept of counting. They can sort objects by shape and by color. They're able to complete age-appropriate puzzles, and they'll be able to recognize and identify common objects and pictures. So these are all really great things to work on at home, simple things you can work on at home. You can play a memory game, and you guys can take turns giving each other directions. So like Simon says, for example, if you want to work on the memory and the 3-step direction, you can say, put your hands on your head, then turn around and touch the ground. And then you can also get them to tell you longer, more elaborate stories to really work on their imagination and their memory. And then really encourage their problem solving skill. So really waiting to see if your little one needs help with something first before jumping in and helping them will also really help. So in terms of their social skills, like I mentioned before, by the time they're around 3, they usually have 1 or 2 friends. They really like to be around children. And this is when you're going to see now that they really prefer the company of their own peers versus company with you. And then this is when they'll start to actually share and like to play with other children, like I said. And this is when they'll also start taking turns. And they'll start to show feelings in a more socially acceptable way. And you'll also notice temper tantrums are now less frequent. They don't stop, they're just less frequent than when they were around the 2 to 3 year mark. And this is because they are now developing their language skill at such a rapid pace. So usually with that, they're a bit more expressive with their feelings, and we now understand how they're feeling a little bit better. Therefore, the tantrums decrease a little bit more. And again, because we've been working on turn taking and sharing between 0 to 3, now that they're between 3 and 4 years of age, that concept is finally starting to stick with them. So now they're starting to share and take turns with their peers, especially now that they're enjoying playing with others. So to really encourage these social skills, you can encourage group games with simple rules like Ring Around the Rosie, Duck Duck Goose, Hide and Seek, with some rules. And then, like I mentioned last week, we do have Zoom groups, live Zoom groups. If you do play groups, then you can do Zoom play groups. Siblings is also a great way to utilize as well. And songs and rhymes not only encourage speech and language, but it also encourages friends to come together and sing. So I mentioned last week that by the time like 2 to 3, by the time they're approaching 3 years, maybe this is when you'll start to think about potty training. But it's definitely more so by the time they're 4, especially because now we're approaching junior kindergarten. A lot of 4-year-olds are going into junior kindergarten. So parents now worry if they don't have them potty trained by the time they need to go to school, then they might not be able to. And so it's the exact same strategies that you want to use from last week, where you don't want to rush them, you don't want to shame them if they have accidents or be angry at them. It's just like everything else, it's a learning process. And your little one will let you know if they're ready. Like I said, like I usually say at the beginning or at the end of these videos, some children will hit milestones earlier than other children. So if your little one seems like they were ready when they were like 2.5 or 3 years of age, that might not be the same as another little one, or even their sibling who might have been ready when they were 3.5, 4 years of age. So we really got to keep at their pace and make sure that they're ready, so that they don't view potty training as a negative thing, and they don't view peeing or pooping as something negative or something shameful. As for sleep, you're going to notice that compared to when they were 1 or 2, your 3 and 4-year-old, their nap might get reduced. So for most 3 and 4-year-olds, they're still going to need anywhere between 10 to 13 hours of sleep. And you might notice that they've dropped a nap. So maybe if your little one was taking 2 naps before, now they might only need 1. Sometimes not at all, as long as they're getting 10 to 13 hours of sleep. Again, each child is different. Some might not need naps during the day, but some might need 1, or maybe your child hasn't dropped any of their naps and they're sleeping and they're still napping twice during the daytime, but they're short naps. Also, like I mentioned before, last week, you might start noticing nightmares by the time they get to around 2 and 3, and more so by the time they get to 4, because like I mentioned, their imagination is now blossoming. They're more complex with their imagination and their imaginative play, but hand in hand are nightmares and night terrors. So that is something to look out for. So now that your little one is approaching the 4-year mark, they now know the simple emotions, but this is a really great time to work on more complex emotions while really working on their memory. So you can make this at home with your little one, or your little one can draw out the faces. So there's so many different ways to create this. One way you can do it is if you make it yourself, and then you can really put in the different, more complex emotions, mixing it with the simple emotions that they already know, like sad, happy, angry, maybe tired, with a little bit more complex emotions like frightened, embarrassed, anxious. And then you can either turn this into a bingo card, or what I've done is I've created the same faces and the same labels. And if you want to work on their memory, if you put them, like, you put these smaller ones flat like this on the table so they can't see it, and they'll have to try and match the emotions by trying to remember where the card is. So you can turn it into a memory game like that. Or what you can do is write down the words, and then you can have your little one actually try and figure out what that face or that feeling might look like. by getting them to draw it themselves. So that is a really great way to talk, to have a conversation about more complex emotions. You can also use this as a great opportunity to talk about empathy and to talk about emotions of other people, because now that they're approaching 4 years of age, it's no longer me, myself, and I, but now it's more, now they're starting to think about other people, and how other people might have emotions that differ from them. Whereas when they were younger, around the 3 and under mark, they just assume that everybody's feeling the same way as they are, and also like they won't understand why you don't understand them, and that's how tantrums kind of explode and happen. But at the 4-year, as you approach 4 years of age, empathy will now start to develop a little bit more, and this is when you'll find them maybe comforting a friend if they're sad and stuff like that. But another great activity to do with your 3 and 4-year-old is cooking and baking. Cooking and baking is such a great way to work to really refine those fine motor skills, but you can also talk about math and problem solving and critical thinking skills, which is all needed for that cognitive development. You can really start to encourage speech and language by really using more complex descriptive words, to talk about texture, smell, taste, heat, temperature, all this stuff. You can also start working on science skills. So baking and cooking is technically a science because you combine certain ingredients to make something completely different. You can also talk to them about pre-literacy, pre-writing skills in cooking and in baking. If you're following a recipe, you can get them to find the ingredients that you're gonna need, either by helping them out by reading it, or you can make pictures and have the words on the bottom, and then they will have to try and find and match to where it is in the kitchen. Same thing with the steps and the recipes. If you guys are interested, I do a Cooking with Caregiver and Me series where it's all simple recipes that you can do at home with your little one, and I offer little tips and strategies throughout the videos as to how you can involve your little one in the cooking and the baking process. Cooking and baking you can do at any age, but I find it's a lot more receptive and a lot more appreciated at the 3 and 4 year mark, because they can do so much more and they can understand so much more, and they're growing to be little independent people, and they just want that sense of confidence and that sense of pride. But thank you so much for joining me on this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found this somewhat useful. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please do reach out and email me. My email in these videos are always in the description box on our YouTube page. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on Facebook. We put a lot of updates, and a lot of our programs, our live programs, are on there as well. And I will see you all next week. Bye everyone.